Okay, so let's, can they hear me?
Yes.
Is it okay now? For sure?
Yeah.
Can you double check? Okay. Good. I'm just, okay, now this thing, can we move to the next slide? It moves too fast. So, okay. So I will tell you to move the slides better than this thing doesn't seem to be working very well. Project aims to build the capacity of individuals and organizations. And I've already mentioned the rest. What is the vision of the project is true participation and involvement. And of course, again, here is not very easy. How can we engage literally, for example, only hospitals, there's 13,000 hospitals in Europe. We cannot touch them all, but we can expect to try to reach them. So for example, one of our partners, Hope, will help us reach other hospital federations scattered in Europe. But at the same time, we have partners that are hospitals in the project. So my vision is that we need to engage with associations of actors, associations of stakeholders, because they are the networks that can take the message over to large number of organizations, but we also need to have insight from those particular organizations on what are their needs, and in this case, particularly regarding the exchange format, what would make them invest? And this is the critical question. What makes a company invest in changing their software to be compatible with the electronic healthcare record exchange format? What makes a health organization willing to invest in upgrading, for example, their IT software for a more compatible, more interoperable solution? Assuming we solve all the other topics, we come up with the definitions correctly. Let's move on to the next one. We can move to the next slide. So 4 main scopes of the project: establishing a sustainable, scalable public infrastructure for digital health innovation. And it's important to clarify that the word infrastructure here means more than just an IT infrastructure. It means a shared understanding, common guidance, and I would say an energy, sort of a European energy to move the systems. In many countries, in many healthcare facilities, and in many even national level, like for example, Kanta services in Finland or ELGA services in Austria, to name just a few examples, transactions already exist. So we are already exchanging data. The problem is we are exchanging data in each country in a way that it is not compatible with the other countries. Now, what motivates people to change and really do it in the same way? This is the challenge. So for this, we need to demonstrate the feasibility of real-life interoperable solutions. So why is this better than not having interoperability? As I said already, establishing and sustaining a pan-European ecosystem. And for me, at least, this ecosystem is an ecosystem of doers. Companies that are going back and thinking, can we suggest to our clients that they pay us a little bit more money, but they get a new upgrade version that is compatible with the electronic healthcare record exchange format. Hospitals, primary care facilities, national level health sharing platforms that are willing to say, we want to be part of this ecosystem. We want to know the standards. We want to know the bundle of interoperability assets, and we are willing to invest in learning about it and also co-creating it if still possible. And it is still possible because it's not finished yet. It's still in construction. Many of the guidance that we have received from previous projects is work in progress. Create and validate a framework that enables the further exploitation. So once we have large sharing of data, then how can we exploit? Next slide. We want to have a participatory design approach. which means to involve partners and actively and critically involve people in the different project phases. This session is an example of this. Many EU projects that I've been participating with and coordinated in the past, the first meeting is closed meeting. And we wanted to start the first day. This is not a kickoff meeting. We already had our kickoff meeting online, but this is our first face-to-face meeting. And within the face-to-face meeting, we have this online hybrid session that allows anyone in the world to also know about the project and participate. And I think this is an important ethos of this collaboration effort, which is that we remain open and not produce something arrogantly from the top and then publish our deliverables on a website and expect the world to read them furiously and follow them as the Bible for interoperability. I think if they write the Bible with us, maybe they will be more religious. And sorry for this religious metaphor, but anyway. Let's move on to the next slide. We are in the middle of a very busy time in Europe. Member states are doing significant investments in digital transformation with resilient funds, with reform funds. We have the health network in a changing mode, eventually to a new structure of governance, following the European health data space legislation, which sets in place practices, governances, and infrastructures. And also we have My Health at EU finally moving around, and we have now, we can start talking seriously about cross-border services. So this is happening. And in the middle of this, we have to tell everyone that if we don't change, this is how I see the exchange format. If we don't change the way we do digital solutions at the level of the laboratory IT systems, the radiology IT systems, the hospital IT systems, the primary care IT systems, if we don't change there at that level, we will never have the data that is necessary for all the dreams that people write about the exchange, or cross-border exchange, or the large big data exploration hopes that we project onto the European health data space. Let's next slide. Don't worry, I'm not going to explain this again. Just to point out that, of course, we have our work packages, our deliverables. We will have all this information on our website sooner rather than later. Unfortunately, it's not yet today, but we didn't want to scare everyone with too much information online. So if you Google or chat GTP about XpanDH today, it's still not a lot there yet. So you can still contribute to talking about it. So make sure you tweet as much as possible starting today, and LinkedIn and all of that, but we will have more opportunities to talk about communicating about and with the exchange format. This is to give you time to understand that the deliverable 1.4 is very important for us to coordinate the entire effort. Creating the assets bundles, the interoperability asset bundles that we call the X bundles. So concrete, as much as we can, set of instructions for how an IT company or a health organization can get ready and get going in a sort of a plug-and-play attitude for the exchange format, which will come from Work Package 3. Then in Work Package 4, we want to tease out some feasibility, some exploitation exercises showing that it makes a difference to have an exchange format rather than having just a CDA or a FHIR format that is different from one country to another. So it's having a common format for Europe when we exchange laboratories, having a common format for Europe when we share imaging reports and so on and so forth. Why is that useful? We need to show that. And then, of course, with Work Package 5 and 6, we are working on developing this ecosystem. And again, I want to emphasize the responsibility of everyone listening to this presentation now and in the future to expand the XpanD network. Next slide. And then finally, expectations. So the first one, individuals, researchers, health systems, workforce across borders in the EU digital single market will have improved interoperability. Next one. individuals have an improved level of accessibility, control, and portability. So we need to get to the stage where we show that exchange format can provide this to some individuals. And of course, over the years, it will provide that to more and more individuals. Next slide. Policymakers and members of the health network are better informed and advised regarding potential evolutions. So this expected outcome of this project is very important, and we'll have a brief presentation from Isabelle, as France is the co-chair of the health network right now. And this is fundamental to understand that gone are the days where projects in Europe, in my opinion, can be detached from policy. We cannot develop technical projects about cross-border or intra-border interoperability which are not aligned with what ministries of health want to do, have money to do, and want to do together with the European Commission. So there is fundamental alignment is crucial. Next one. And then different target populations, so trying to target everyone, designers, developers, healthcare professionals. One of the ways we are going to try to do this is through mechanisms of co-creation and trying to stimulate communities of co-creation where developers and patients and professionals are brought together. And this meant that in the consortium, we also seek to include patient associations, and we've done that, of course, SMEs and also large companies. Next slide. And now the final slide that I have, as I'm getting over time. So this slide is super busy, and it's on purpose, so you can take a picture. I would like you to take a picture of this slide, and also online you can make a print screen. And because I believe, now this is the part where I'm super arrogant and you start to hate me, but it's okay. So this is how I see into the future what European health electronic health record exchange format based health service infrastructure would look like. The first one, so in a few years, maybe 2, maybe 10, some people say, oh, Europe took too long to start exchanging e-prescriptions cross-border. Shame on you. You started talking about that in EPSOS in 2008, and you had the first prescriptions shared between Finland and Estonia in 2018. Well, anyone that tells me this, I always answer, shame on the other parts of the world which don't do it yet. Maybe it takes 10 years. That's not a problem. You know, look at kids. They are born and 10 years of age, they don't do certain things. At 20 years of age, they do other things. And sometimes they go over and they become Nobel Prize winners when they are 70. Well, I hope we don't take 70 years to build a cross-border and integrated health and care ecosystem. But, maybe 1 or 2 years or 5. Or 10, we don't really know. And I don't think that is crucial. Politicians love to put a date and say, by 2030, Europe is all interconnected. Well, why 2030? What if we have another pandemic? Will it speed us? Will it make us go slow? We had the last pandemic a few years ago, and we saw that it actually improved our speed. We decided quickly, and we did more interconnection. So, in that time, I see that there is an online updated one-stop shop resource. So maybe a website, maybe a GitHub thingy or a sort of a GitHub Plus kind of thing, where specifications and examples of script messages and other IT customizations that allow electronic health records to have exchange format compatible microservices and messaging. Such facility, I call it the interoperability facility, is human readable and pedagogical, so it would have use cases, it would have tips for programmers, it would have tips for developers, but it is also machine readable, and it will therefore be able to be read by an AI system supporting AI-based code creation, such as ChatGPT that already writes fire messages. I'm not sure how good they are, but we can test them and then see. They are only going to get better, that is for sure. Now, supporting real-time semantic and dataset catalog updates and creating simulation training environments. There is a fast-acting editorial team And we have talked about a standing committee for semantics. We have talked about a permanent body of experts in Europe, in Brussels, whatever, virtually. I don't really think we need to decide that today, but we know we need to have a governing body looking at how we define the new domains every month, every year, depending on what we want to do with the exchange format. There is a maturing health IT industry, and I was very careful with this word maturing and not mature. We do have a problem with our industry. It is very scattered, a lot of SMEs, and that's not bad, but it is difficult for them to catch up with all this innovation and all these standards and definitions. So we will have a maturing health IT industry capable of collaborating in large-scale interoperability efforts. We will have national digital health policies aligned with WHO and EU digital health targets. This is very important. We cannot dream of an exchange format and not talk with ministries of health and digital health agencies and make sure they use structural funds, our resilience funds and others to build new solutions utilizing the exchange format and actually including the exchange format in their procurement specification. There is different enlarging XNets, so networks using and promoting the use of the exchange format. So we will need, in 2 or 3 years, we still need more and more enlarging networks that talk about this vision. And lastly, but not least, there is a digital aware and inclusive network of patients and civil society associations. And we know from our work, for example, here in ISCTE, we brought a bunch of patient associations to this room. We signed with them in digital health inclusive letter, and we identified that one of the big reasons why many patient associations do not fight for health data moving around and being explored for the better care that they, patients, need to receive is because they struggle with these complexities. Digital health, especially when cross-border interoperability topics are discussed, is too complicated and often off-putting of patient associations and civil society associations. So we need to do more on health data activism. And that's over from me. Thank you very much for the opportunity to tell you a little bit about the project, also how I see that we will impact in Europe in maybe 2, 3, 5 years from now. And I hesitated on the title. I said EU and beyond. Then I took out the beyond because it was too big for the slide. But I think by the end of 3 years, if we do a good job in Europe, we will have other countries outside Europe looking at what we are doing. So I don't think the exchange format will continue to be called European exchange format. So we should be careful and slowly dropping the first E and call it electronic health record exchange format. Because if we do a good job, we will have countries like Korea, Singapore, and many others that looked to our COVID certificate for inspiration. We will have them also looking for us for inspiration for their own problems, because in all countries of the world, electronic health records are still siloed and people are suffering from that because integrated care is not available to them. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Henrique, for your speech. We have some questions here, but I think that you can answer in the end of the presentation. So I would like to invite Kyriacos from his presentation. He will do a presentation by online mode, so I will just pass you.
Many thanks, Anderson. May I ask if I am audible and everyone can hear me? We do not seem to have any reaction, so we can carry on. So, good morning to all attendees, colleagues and friends online and on the premises. And many thanks for the opportunity to address you today after the first opportunity I had to speak to this consortium a few weeks ago. The project topic and scope are, of course, that of mobilizing and building capacity, as Henrique was describing earlier, in individuals and organizations to create adapt and explore the purposeful use of interoperable digital health solutions. These based on a shared adoption of our European electronic health record exchange format, the EEHRxF, across Europe. And this comes at a very important moment because, on the one hand, the political negotiations of the proposed EHDS regulation, the one for the European health data space, are advancing well. And digital health authorities and other stakeholders across the member states have been engaging in domestic eHealth infrastructure investment and certain key projects to define and co-create the ways in which eHealth service provision across our countries and domestically will become a reality for citizens and patients, users and non-users of these services, for example, family members. XpanDH is one of these key projects. And in that sense, it fits within a landscape of other projects that the consortium will have to relate to. All these projects helping us to reach that new level and that new reality. For example, I was very happy to hear of Marcelo Melgara talking about how far eHealth has taken the EEHRxF specifications at the kickoff meeting of XpanDH. To be sure, eHealth and its deliverables are not the only project and resources to build upon and link within this landscape. So my colleague Konstantin Hyppönen from DG SANTÉ will shortly provide you with a full overview and the methodology of how we can keep moving forward in a coherent and concerted manner with clear definitions as we prepare for introducing, having adopted, and using the needed artifacts working across the ecosystem. And for any questions on these, please contact us for clarity to be provided at any point. The European Commission, as appropriate, for example, acknowledging project grant agreements that are in place, seeks to avoid unnecessary overlap among projects, their work and deliverables. Also seeks to create meaningful synergies between and among projects that add value to planned and existing eHealth services, for example, as part of myHealth.eu, and indeed domestically where appropriate. And also looks to address the European health data space priority data categories and other use cases as appropriate in co-funded projects. And as part of our wider coordination efforts with the member states, we wish to co-create and co-construct with stakeholders and a full and clear view of actions in this policy area and promote optimal use of project funding. So, in this regard, I can only highlight a few concepts and keywords that seem important for XpanDH as a project. Firstly, synergy with fast and ongoing projects and actions for that co-creation and co-implementation to be brought about. The second one is amplification of your key messages. The aspiration really is that this network of networks approach produces a critical mass of expanders, actors within and beyond the project, for them to take us as far as possible into the ecosystems of different member states. The last ones being ecosystem and equity, as this has also been a priority for the World Health Organization at the global level. We do need to work towards ensuring access to these new solutions and services is there for everyone. And in that sense, we need to discover new parts of the ecosystem across the member states and see to work with these stakeholders just as we would do with colleagues around this table and in this room today and of course online. On behalf of Unit H3 at DG CONECT, we extend our best wishes for the success of XpanDH. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Kyriacos, for your great presentation. And now I would like to invite Konstantin for his presentation.
Good afternoon, everybody. Hopefully you can hear me well. And hopefully we can also get the slides on the screen. Thank you very much. So indeed, my name is Konstantin Hyppönen. I'm working in the European Commission for DG SANTÉ for unit on digital health. And today I wanted to speak about actually two topics. One topic is how do we progress towards the EHDS, European Health Data Space, and specifically the development of the format there. And the second topic I wanted to speak about is what is the format itself. Apparently I can even go to the next slides myself. So let's start with the first topic. What is the European Electronic Health Record Exchange format in the European Health Data Space? Now there is a proposal for a regulation, European Health Data Space under negotiations, and the format is there. So if we go to the next slide. It's in multiple articles. There is an article which is named the European Electronic Health Record Exchange format. The format would be set up by the implementing acts adopted by the European Commission, and the implementing acts would lay down the technical specifications on a few priority categories of personal electronic health data. That is patient summaries, electronic prescriptions, lab results and reports, medical images and reports, and also discharge reports. In the implementing acts, in the technical specifications, we should define data sets, we should define coding systems, values, and further technical specifications. And then these should be implemented in all member states so that they could provide the data to the natural persons directly or through transmitting it at request of the person to a healthcare provider. And also the data should be read and accepted by the data recipient. The data should be, of course, also issued to the natural persons in this very specific format. So the format would become very relevant, and because of that, it's also explained in other articles in EHDS. So if you go further, it's also mentioned in Article 12. Slide. Yeah. So the article would be also used in the My Health at EU infrastructure. The format would be used in My Health at EU infrastructure for the cross-border exchange of electronic health data. But not only in that infrastructure. There is also a link to so-called common specifications, which would there would be a number of documents defining scope of the document, defining the type of the specifications, applicability to different categories of electronic health record systems, or functions included in them, versions, periods of validity, normative parts, explanatory parts, also defining the datasets, code systems, values, other requirements related to data quality, technical specifications, requirements and principles related to security, and identification management. So what it means in plain language is that the format would be implemented in all electronic health record exchange, in all electronic health record systems used in the European Union. And that would be checked by the manufacturer using the self-certification process according to these common specifications. It means the format would be implemented everywhere in all products on the market in the European Union. So the format is really important for the success of the European health data space, and that's why we should think how to implement the format in a way that would facilitate this success. So what do we have already on the format? We do have a Commission recommendation on the European Electronic Health Record Exchange format from 2019. We do have go back. We do have existing eHealth network guidelines on patient summary, e-prescription, and lab results, and other guidelines are in the making. We do have already implementations operational in My Health at the EU. 11 member states are using the format for cross-border data exchange. And we also have their implementation guides, testing tools, and so on. The recently finished project eHealth has developed also technical specifications on lab results, hospital discharge reports, medical images, plus extension of patient summary for rare diseases. And of course, there are many existing templates and implementation guides from international and national projects. But we are not there yet, because in order to have format which is really actionable and implementable, we need to do more. And if we go further, the next slide, we will see some of the actions which are already happening or have happened in the past. So Henrique was already mentioning some previous projects like EPSOS. It was concentrating on the development of My Health at the infrastructure, but also on the development of the basic building blocks of the format. We just recently had a project named eHealth, which has worked on lab results, hospital discharge reports, medical images. It has defined use cases. It has defined data sets, beautiful data models, and also implementation guides for CDA and FHIR. So two different possibilities, two different base standards. In XpanDH, we will see further elaboration of the format, but even more importantly, pilots and verification of implementability of the formats and setup of the ecosystem, which would facilitate the uptake of the format. However, there are some actions also in the future, in the upcoming months and years, and one of these actions would be the joint action under EU for Health Work Programme 2022. It's now having a very cryptic name, JA09, but hopefully there would be a better name. And it would work actually on the formalization of the format. It would provide recommendations for those future implementing acts under EHDS I was referring to already. And it would also define a model for the certification of EHR systems, including on their compliance with the format itself. Also, further in the future, under Horizon 2023, there is possibilities to launch an action on further expansion of the format. So you see, it's a journey, and what we have already now, it's only a step in this journey. So what we have now is patient summary, a prescription, original clinical documents. Everything is working on HL7 CDA, using PDF, using EHRxF profiles. For the future services, we haven't made yet a decision. What would be actual base standards? What would be the technical specifications for the exchange of lab results, medical images reports, medical hospital discharge reports? And for further data categories, we even haven't started designing them yet. Everything is supported at this point of time by the eHealth network. Even when the EHDS regulation is adopted, there would be the EHDS board and also other bodies working on the infrastructures. And also we have under My Health at the EU work by the solution provider, which actually takes these different artifacts and makes them into implementable specifications and other artifacts. and also implements them in OpenNCP in myHealth at EU. So the journey is very complex, but we are having many actions which are working in the same direction. It would be important to avoid overlaps this was already mentioned by Kyriacos. And in order to avoid overlaps, it's quite important to understand which are the focal points for each and every action. Next slide. So here on this slide, you can see all the types of different actions existing or upcoming for the primary use of electronic health data. And many of these actions, they also involve different types of activities related to the format. So we have the development of myHealth at EU, further expansion on geographical basis, but also we have capacity building, supporting member states in the uptake of EHDS requirements and EHDS implementations. We will have the joint action already mentioned under Work Program 2022. And also there would be, there is a patient access pilot, which is now running. It's called PathED. And further support for patient access is planned. At the same time, there is work on further data categories. There are projects like eHealth, XpanDH, and also the successor actions related to the development of the format. I think we can skip the next slide to speed up a bit, and I would ask you a question. What is it, the format? So the question is on the next slide. And I give you a few options. All of them are related to the patient summary. You can see on the screen different things that different people could name as a format. So we have the eHealth Network Patient Summary Guidelines version 3.1. Is it defining the format? As an alternative, we also have International Patient Summary, which is by far quite compliant with the eHealth Network Patient Summary Guidelines, and it's an international standard. Is it the format? We can have detailed implementation guides, IPS FHIR. Is that a format? We also see the implementation in myHealth at EU, which is operational. It has been implemented by a few member states in production, and many more are upcoming. Version 6, is it the format? Maybe it's HL7 FHIR that we name a format, or maybe it's version R4, maybe it's HL7 CDA. Is it the format? It's quite broad, right? We can also go more detailed, and then the patient summary elements, they can be found in IHE patient care coordination, CDA content modules. Is that the format? We can go even broader and say JSON, XML are the formats, or maybe PDF is a format. So all of that, these are the possibilities for a format for a patient summary. And if you click once more, what we see is that a patient summary can be represented using any of these. And the level of detail, it varies significantly. It can be very detailed. It can be a PDF. Not all of these options, they provide direct instructions to implement the format. And not all of them are interoperable, in fact. So if we want to be able to exchange data, plug and play, not all of these options would support that. So what would be the useful features of the data exchange formats? On the next slide, I tried to list some of them. The format should be publicly available, should be preferably free of charge to all users. It doesn't mean that there may be no free, some commercial products, maybe supporting tools, maybe consultation associated with the use of the format, but the format itself, it should be available publicly. And it should be developed through a collaborative process we heard already the need for involvement of different stakeholders, like patients, health professionals, developers, and research organizations. And that is to make the format implementable, but also usable. So the descriptions should be detailed enough, prescriptive, unambiguous, and we should avoid different interpretations that could lead to problems in interoperability. In order to develop a format, we need to put some elements together, and I will not bore you with so many elements. I listed all of them that I thought of on the slides, but maybe you can take the slides with you and study them later. So if you go on a few next slides, you will see long tables with different elements. But in the interest of time, I think we can skip them and go. So go next. So you see many different elements. Data definitions could be considered in good format. On the next slide, you see some technology building blocks. Like, is it CDA, is it FHIR, or maybe DICOM, profiles, message transfer profiles, additional technical specifications, all of that could be part of the format. On the next slide, you will see further elements. It's business requirements and workflows. What use cases are supported by the format? What are the requirements for the implementation? What is the infrastructure for the use of the format? Maybe there are some licenses, legal agreements. On the next slide, you will see even more. There are tools for release management processes, stakeholder involvement processes, publication platform that was already mentioned, which is very relevant, testing procedures and tools, also very important for the implementability of the format. And next is further supporting elements. So 25 different things that we have on the slides, and many more could be added, or maybe all of them can be elaborated more. So going to my last slide, which is here, is a question to you. Which elements would you like to address by XpanDH? Would you like to address all of them, or maybe concentrate on a few building blocks of relevance and importance in line with the goals of XpanDH? I would also suggest keeping in mind that there are different actions already existing in the past or in the future, or ongoing at the moment. And application of work should be avoided. However, if the same project is working on the same element, it's not always the full application. Sometimes the evolution is needed in time. Sometimes there are further developments or maybe complementing activities. However, it's important that we would not only have drafts of these elements, but at some point we would say, yes, this is version number 1, and this is stable. Because in order to have that version, in order to have it implemented in all EHR systems around the European Union, it has to be stable at some point of time. So we need to close, not only open. In any case, a lot of work is lying ahead of us. So with so many elements and so different data categories, yes, we will need a lot of activities on the development of the format, and I wish all the best to the XpanDH project to tackle some of them. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Konstantin, for a nice speech. We will just move to the Isabelle right now, and then we can open for questions and some questions at the end of the presentation. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for your invitation, and happy also to share some thoughts with the audience. So I'm Isabelle ZABLIT. I'm the eHealth network representative for France. So just presented and some parts of the work presented by Konstantin. I'm in charge of Europe and International, the French Ministry of Health in what we named the Digital Health Delegation of the Ministry of Health. So if we can move to the next slide. I just would like to make some introduction with a French look at what we are building collectively in Europe. First of all, and I think it's very important to share with you is the fact that France has been supporting a vision of European data space from start. And what we are actually building here is not only for health, but later on it will be followed by other areas of and sectors of the economy. So we have I would say a double responsibility, because we have a responsibility to build and to meet the European challenges for the health sector, but moreover to also pave the way for the future European data spaces. And all the questions that we are raising regarding interoperability, for instance, will be also an asset for the next European data spaces. So we are talking about answering some issues in health, but also about building a European sovereignty, a strategy for digital. We want to deliver more services for the citizens, and we want to ensure that we are working in a trusty and secure environment. And those are each of them is quite a huge challenge. So we have quite a lot of energy to move forward. So next slide, please. So in France, we have been engaging on the two sides of the European health data space, both on the primary use of health data and secondary use of data, with a first service which is operational via a web service called CESALI, which allows the health professionals in France to connect and to request patient summaries from other European countries when they handle the case of a patient, and with the consent of the patient. And secondly, the health data hub in France is in charge of leading the consortium who's implementing the pilot for the secondary use of health data within the European health data space. The concern of having the ecosystem embarked in our journey is absolutely critical, and this is the reason why after the European-wide consultation that was driven by the European Commission, we also have at national level a public consultation that will be kept active through the negotiation of the European health data space. So next slide, please. During the French presidency, our main concern was to support the European health data space strategy and vision. So to make it happen, we've taken some small steps to move forward. One of them being to set up the ethical framework for digital health in Europe, which was a key building block to pave the way for the European health data space. As Konstantin said, from a different angle, we need to make things usable, and there is no usage if there is no trust. And there is no trust if citizens do not understand where they go. So that was an important for us step to use. Regarding the technical standards, we have also moved forward with Nomad City, which was France was one of the late countries to join the movement, and that was also a very strong sign on our side to ensure that we all agree on technical standards and move forward all together. So if we can move. So I've already mentioned the importance of smaller steps. We are tackling very huge challenges, so we need to be extremely pragmatic in what we are doing and how we are doing things, and make sure that we have a virtuous circle, that usage is embarked step by step, and forget about plans that are made 10 years from here and never become concrete. So this is also a very important thing to do, and the work that is currently being done by the eHealth network is extremely critical for that. So if we can move. So for those who are not aware of the status of the current the negotiation regarding the European health data space, so just to give you at a glance where we are, the regulation is divided in chapters that tackle some of the issues. So one chapter, for instance, for primary use, one chapter for the digital single market, meaning the certification of electronic health record, and one chapter about the secondary use of data, and other chapters later on for other parts of the and very important ones about the regulation too. So we are heading to a progress report during next EXPO in Stockholm. Not the next EXPO, sorry, the next one is in March, but we'll not have EHDS on the agenda, but more in June. And we are working quite hard on the chapters that I just mentioned, and hopefully moving to trilogues after the Swedish presidency, when the report that has just been published by the European Parliament commissions in charge will be voted in Parliament, and probably next September. So this is the current status. That means that also when people refer to EHDS, sometimes they have the impression that we are working on something which is very far in the future. Used to say that it could be something that would happen as from 2025, which is by the way tomorrow. So if we can move forward. So it's a critical time to structure the future of digital health within the EU, and as Henrique mentioned, beyond, probably, because we believe that this is a key building block to work within the EU, where we share the same regulation, which make things much easier to move forward. It's a regulation that will be critical for sharing data for care, to create a single market for digital health data, and for creating the European level for the secondary use of data. So this is for something very critical, and from a very pragmatic point of view, it's also a change and a shift of governance, with a current governance which is managed by the eHealth network, and moving to the EHDS board, as Konstantin mentioned. So if we can move forward. So we are working now, and France, as mentioned, as taking the seat of the co-chair, so we're representing the member states in that current governance. We are working with a very proactive transition period of time. Currently, we have a network of, sorry, Konstantin, I remarked that I mentioned Ukraine, that I should maybe consider differently. We have a network of at least 29 countries, because we have 27 EU member states, Norway and Iceland on a voluntary basis as associate members. And Ukraine has also access to the implementation of MyHealth.eu, which means that in the future will most probably be a network of 30 countries. The network is quite collaborative and active, with a lot of working groups and on different topics and the steering of MyHealth@EU implementation, because EHDS is not only a future regulation, but moreover, it's also something which is really implemented, which makes a big difference with other regulation. Regarding the achievements of the network, they've been already mentioned. We are working currently on a work plan for 2023, which is a key element, and I will come back on several aspects of that work plan. It's a work in process because we are heading to the next eHealth network meeting in next March, where we hope we will be ready for adoption by the eHealth network of this work plan. Next slide, please. So, about what are we working in this work plan? When we are heading to a transition period, as I said, the why is very important. Why are we here? What are we doing? And what are our goals? And the what are the objectives of the network? So that the two sides of the coin, I would say, to make this transition period effective. Next slide, please. So I'm not going to comment on that, but this is just that has been said. One of the key elements is to prepare the interoperability guidelines for the use case in cross-border healthcare and to prepare the European health data space. Next slide, please. That means that we target to have an expansion and successful implementation of MyHealth@EU, the development of health in digital health in member states, and the transition to EHDS governance. Having said that, it translates into more operational topics like interoperability. Next slide. So we have identified 5 priorities, which are currently draft key priorities, because this is, again, work in process. The first one is to identify the needs for funding. And I believe this is a very important issue regarding the strategic moves that have to take place in each member state, and adaptation, and also embarking the entire ecosystem. Then regarding interoperability, it's very key to achieve the future technical common choices. So I'm really glad to further understand how XpanDH project will contribute to that very much. And we are also trying to better formalize our process. One of the key elements is that the national roadmaps needs to be synchronized to the European roadmap and European and beyond for Henrique. But that means also formalizing the process and making sure, as Konstantin pointed out, to make it collaborative, which is absolutely if in case it doesn't take place, it's a showstopper for ensuring global interoperability. So a third priority would be to move on with the implementation of the ethical principle, and then to also have better support in the sharing of best practices, because and essentially for what we are doing in proposing new use case and working on the specification for those future use cases. Some countries are more advanced than others, and we need also to have a combination of forces to help the ones that are lagging behind to progress even further. And this is the case for France. We are late on several topics, and it's very useful when we look at other countries and make sure that we understand what and why they have done some things to help us speed up the process. Cooperate more effectively. It's also a key element. So we can move forward. Sorry, listen. So those key priorities ensure that we have these elements. We have a next interoperability choice, which will be soon submitted to vote. But all of the key priorities, in fact, will support the transition. And again, there might be some adaptation and some changes because we are not yet at the point of the validation of those key priorities. So next slide, please. So what are the key elements that we need also to integrate in this? First, we have the articulation with other European regulation, and you may be aware that there is a new regulation that has been issued by the Commission most recently, which is let's say, an horizontal one addressing all public service, which is the Interoperability Act. So all the choices that we are going to make in the formats that were just mentioned will also need to be aligned with the requirements of the Interoperability Act. And this is, I would say, a new piece in the context, at least for us member states. The second thing is that the future governance needs to be a little bit clarified, and even if we are aware of the future EHDS board with the means of implementing acts as previously mentioned, you know that we are going to change because the current what is planned in the regulation is the fact that the Commission will be the unique chair of the EHDS board. There will be expert groups, but there is not yet a full understanding of how it will work actually in the very pragmatic side of the coin. It also embarks the fact that there is a shift of paradigm for the European Commission, because the Commission is going to be the provider of services for member states. It's already the case with MyHealth.eu, but it will be even more the case with the two sides of the European health data space. That means also that we are going to have a new framework of collaboration between the Commission and member states and within and among the member states, and that we will have new schemes of decision-making processes, and including the way that we're actually going to have to take for the choice of standards. So all of those things need to be clarified in the coming months. For the member states, we are moving from a voluntary to a mandatory participation, and from a voluntary to a mandatory use of standards. So anticipation will be key for member states to move all the national impacts that it embarks. It's not only about building the European vision, it's also about embracing the impacts at national level, which is huge. Next slide is also mentioning some of the other challenges. We are also within the eHealth network concentrating on primary use of data. We will now have a new playground with the secondary use of data in the future governance with a dedicated subgroup. We'll have to make the infrastructure evolve and the processes evolve and tackle the next steps of technology. And that means also building European coordination services to support all this vision. So from member states, what we hear is that they're required to have a strong voice in the decision-making processes, the anticipation I already mentioned, to synchronize national and European roadmaps, and the support in the transition and the challenge of embarking the ecosystem. We have also another challenge, which is to embark the EU citizens, not only in the governance, but also in the decision-making process. I've just read the draft report of the Parliament, which is pointing out this part also. And all of us believe that we will have the context to make the right choice at the right time and at the right level for any choice, including the technical standards. Thank you very much, and happy to answer any question.
Thank you so much, Isabelle, for your presentation. And now I would like to open the floor for some questions that you have here in chat. So I will put it on the screen to everybody see. And yes, basically we have some questions in here. Everyone. So the first question is for the Henrique. Please, Henrique, could you answer?
Yeah, too small. How can we integrate the multinationals that sold digital platforms for health organizations to convince them to do a common one for all the European community? Because for me, the major problem that we are facing is corruption levels that impact in the quality of care, of quality health delivered to the European citizens. Well, I think these are three different topics. One is about coming up with one unified solution. I think we have all discussed this in many forums, national, internationally, and we see that there is benefit in having more than one solution. We also know that there is benefit in not having too many solutions. So what is the perfect size for the markets is one of the biggest challenges, and we see that the IT market changes over the years from big companies, and then when we think that the big companies will take over the entire market, you start seeing niche companies coming out with good solutions. So I think that the big challenge, and this is not the common, this is the normal answer, but those of you that know me, I don't like common answers. It's about using the same definitions. Now, this is true, and it is, and this is the work that has been discussed today so far. A lot of work. It will take several steps, technical, legal, and convincing. And as Isabelle was saying, it's then about also adopting an ecosystem development. So I think the big challenge is, can we keep smaller companies capable of adopting such complex standards, like Konstantin showed us, with so many elements? You almost need to take a master's degree to understand the exchange format. And this cannot be the case. This is a way, it may be as complicated as that, but it can't be communicated like that to a small company. But on the other hand, we also know that if you want to do certain types of businesses in life, they are complicated, and you do need a company that has a certain size. So I will risk saying a very polemic sentence, which is the exchange format as it is right now, it may not be for all companies. So maybe companies do need to get together, maybe have common ventures when they go for offering services to large hospitals or large national level projects, build consortiums that are stable. Regarding corruption and changing healthcare provision, I think the more we share data, the more we expose not just corruption, but fraud and inefficiency. And I'm very comfortable to talk to you about this because, for example, when I stepped into the Ministry of Health in Portugal many years ago about digital health, for us, digital health was about saving our country from bankruptcy. And it was very important for us. Greece had the same challenge on e-prescription to make sure that we use digital for saving money that was being wasted and could be better used for healthcare. So actually, it's not bad to think that digital and interoperability can help us provide more resources for healthcare, which are desperately needed in an aging population. So that's over for me. Let's move on to someone else. You want me to read? Konstantin, this next one is for you. Over.
Thank you, Henrique. But which one is the next one? About slides presentations? I cannot answer on behalf of everybody. My slides are available.
Yes. Presentations will take care. No. The more substantial next one. It's just a thank you. So I thought it was a question. No, there's no. It's okay. You're saved. You're saved. We thought there was a question, but it's not a question. It's a compliment to your wonderful presentation. And then we have one. Can you put it a little bit larger? Okay. I think, Isabelle, perhaps you can tackle this next one. Ukraine is very advanced in their eHealth system. Any plan to reuse, integrate their work? I think you mentioned their participation in the eHealth network. Maybe you can elaborate a little bit on that.
Well, in fact, they do not participate to eHealth network, but because currently it's not allowed by the directive of on cross-border healthcare, basically, but they have access to the financing of MyHealth.eu, and they are starting to do the work. So that was a little correction I made as a comment to my slides. However, I fully agree that, of course, we should be inspired by the work they have been doing already. Essentially, for Ukraine, there is also a concern that whenever the current situation will be over, hopefully, that the Ukrainian citizen could move back to their country with their health data at a certain point of time. So this is also part of this. But moreover, this is about the integration of Ukraine in Europe, and it's beyond our control and beyond our scope of discussion here about digital health, Henrique.
Thank you very much. And just as a word of information, there has been already 2 projects funded by the European Commission on what we call neighboring countries. As I was part of one of those efforts to talk to those countries, Ukraine included, about the guidance that we have approved in the eHealth network, such as patient summary and e-prescription. And that is exactly the philosophy, as you mentioned, to make them ready. So if some of these countries at some point in time join as a European Union, they're more ready, but also because citizens move also in the borders, they can start being ready to share data. And I guess we have one more question. Yeah, of course you can. You can put it on the chat so it's easier for them to see. No, go ahead. Let us tackle that one and then over to you. Yeah. Should we put it a little bit bigger? Otherwise,
yeah, that's right. But bigger is a little bit.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay. I have a rather philosophical question almost, but Henrique mentioned something earlier where he said the European EHR exchange format should actually be named an international EHR exchange format because it has a huge potential to be taken up by also other parts of the globe, as it was happening with the European Digital COVID Certificate. And from a standards development perspective, this is really true. We see that happening. The work we have done in eHealth is a lighthouse work, and it is likely that it's taken over by other countries. My question is more, how do you, let's say, what is your feeling about really doing such a step? How much is it important for acceptance of what the Commission is doing here for Europe, that it's still named the European EHR exchange format? How much is it important for an acceptance? Or do you think it would really be possible to, let's say, upgrade our work in Europe here and make an international work? Does that ambush acceptance within the member states?
I think this is a good question for everyone, actually. I would suggest everyone addresses this, and then I can give my personal opinion, not a consortium opinion, because this is a good question for our consortium. So, Kyriacos, do you wanna grab this one, and then maybe Konstantin and Isabelle? I think that is a provoking question. So I will rephrase it.
Thank you, Henrique.
Is it useful to call it European? Is it important for implementation? Should we look at outside Europe as well? Should we change the name? Should we keep talking like that, but do some international work around it? And how does that link with international standard organization?
Well, I'm fine to suggest an answer, Henrique. I'm usually good at least tackling philosophical questions. So what I would say is this, that in the first instance, we have to work on it and prepare it for use within Europe. This is the current intent. This is really the focus of the current coordination efforts we are seeing across the member states. But on the other hand, it is of course true. We have seen it already with the digital COVID certificate that there is interest in European solutions from other parts of this world, precisely because these very often, if not always, reflect European values and norms. And I think at the practical level, we should perhaps prepare it first, and that means really adopting a methodology as, for example, the one Konstantin has prepared, and really seeing to define it as a package, perhaps as a near complete package for the rest of the world to understand, and to your point, readily see, aha, this is it, this is the solution, it is, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 steps, and component parts, and this is it. We can adopt it and we can reap the benefits of.
Thank you very much. Konstantin, over to you.
Thank you. You can't believe, but still lights went off in my room, so I had to switch over to the laptop. So not too much to add to what Kyriacos said, but just to highlight that if 27 member states are able to develop a format which is implementable in all of these member states, is something that can be scalable to further countries. That's clear, and exactly the example of the digital COVID certificate, which is, by the way, the EU digital COVID certificate, it was not stopping its use in 76 countries around the world. So the word European doesn't seem to be, preventing the uptake of the format, simply because everybody understands that it's not one country, it's 27 countries.
Isabelle?
Well, do you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I'm not going to repeat. I fully agree with that. I just would like to cool down a little bit on that, because don't forget that for many countries, there is not yet an interoperability at national level. And so if we look at what is happening in the national roadmaps, I mean, we have still huge efforts to do. The good thing is that the European scale will help structurally, I would say, the national interoperability. So that's very good too. But a lot of people in the ecosystem are very far away from that discussion yet.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Yeah, of course.
Just to speak about the XpanDH project, I don't want to make it easier, but in the World Package 2 presentation of tomorrow, we will try to address how the specification should be organized in order to try to answer to your question. So for people that will be there tomorrow, we're interested to discuss that part.
Marcello Megara, thank you for mentioning me in your presentation. In fact, you and beyond, absolutely yes. My help at you is already beyond, because if you look into the planning of going live, we have 29 member states, as Isabelle said, not just as a member of the Earth Network, but all the member states from EU are there, and Norway and Ireland are there. And look into the past You remember the International Patient Summary that was an EN standard, now is an ISO standard. And there are two guys here, Jürgen and Georgia, that brought to the HL7 worldwide the e-pharmacy profile that now is our standard. So we forgot about Texas, and George and Jürgen will tell us how they are pushing the European evolution into the worldwide standard. So really, Europe is driving, and this is thanks to the, sorry to say, the eHealth network, to those who chair that, to those that inspire that, to the Commission that is really pushing and pulling us, and we are really moving forward. So don't be shy saying you and beyond. You and beyond is now the reality. Thank you, Enrique, and thank you all.
Thank you very much. I think we have to bring this session to a closure in 2 minutes. If there's any burning question, said I would also address the question of the provocation. And I think Isabelle mentioned a very important thing, which is we need to touch reality while we dream. So every morning we should touch reality and then dream about it. And the fact of the matter is that many countries are still struggling. And even the very advanced countries that have some cross-border services, when you actually go there and you try to use those services in all facilities, it's not there. But I also would say that for some industry partners, and I've had that experience because in my recent years of work outside the EU, I noticed that the fact that an EU company can brand itself to be compatible with the EU exchange format, and I agree with Konstantin that to some extent, the fact that we said EU COVID certificate was a double quality seal. It had the quality of having many people using it. It had the quality of having been produced by very solid methods. So our brand is actually quite strong, EU brand or European brand. But our companies, they do need a market sometimes a little bit bigger than the EU market. For two reasons. One has to do with language. For example, Portuguese companies may sell also in Brazil much more than they will sell in other EU countries, or Spanish companies in Spanish-speaking countries, because the language is a very important thing in the digital health markets. So the fact that we can come out to other markets outside, the French is the same example, and so on. The fact that we can have something that our companies can say they are compatible to while going to other markets is also very important, because the more they grow, the more capable they are to offer good and easier and cheaper even solutions in our internal market. So, and I wanted to end this session with this call for thinking about industry, because we often talk about policy and public services, but the exchange format has to be adopted predominantly by private companies that sell to private or public healthcare providers. We can never forget this equation. Of course, national level agencies often are public, and they will also need to adopt the format. And of course, cross-border services, so far we have been building them on public funds and on public infrastructure, EU infrastructure. But when we go, let's call it down to the national, regional, local level, we go more and more to the private sector level. So having something that seduces them into their business models is important. XpanDH has a little bit of that thinking in Work Package 6. We have to look a little bit of what drives these markets and how could we convince them. And also in Work Package 5 and the ecosystem development, we need to consider industry partners as fundamental partners of the ecosystem. So I think this is it for our online session. Thank you very much. I see Konstantin has already left, but Kyriacos, thank you. Isabelle, thank you so much for joining us. It was a little bit short notice, I know, sorry. We are all running very fast.